As I was growing up, I virtually never met some of my aunts and uncles. My mother always explained that it was because they were members of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and their church would not allow them to have any contact with her or with us, their nieces and nephews. Well, I was middle-aged before it became apparent that this was not true. It was a lie. It was, in fact, my mother who had kept us from ever meeting our aunts and uncles, for fear that we kids would have been attracted to what the JWs teach. Most of us would be quite surprised at how often this deception has been used within the institutional church. The religious establishment calls someone a sect or a cult, and they warn everyone to steer clear of them. Now, by doing this, they create a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like my mother, they whisper, or at least imply, "Don't talk to them." But what they shout is that the enemy group has cut themselves off from the rest of us. For many years, the Sydney Morning Herald, probably the most respected newspaper in Australia, included a lot of news coverage of various activities that I and some of my friends did as Christians. At the same time that the religion page in the Sydney Morning Herald never once mentioned that we even existed. Well, I had a friend who's a journalist, and he spoke personally with Alan Gill, the long-standing editor of that same religion page. He did it without Alan knowing that he had any contact with me. He asked Alan why some of the amazing things that we were doing were never mentioned on the very page which specializes in religious news for the Sydney Morning Herald. Alan simply said, "We don't mention them." That was it. Case closed. So obviously, over the years, the chasm grew between us and the religious establishment in Australia. But always it was assumed that I and my friends were the ones who had caused the division. Now, such behavior on the part of the church is pretty much how it deals with any criticism for which it has no good answer. Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, teach that Christians should not go to war. The churches have no answer for that. The Seventh-day Adventists teach that Saturday is the Sabbath and not Sunday. Once again, the churches have no answer for that. The children of God taught that we should forsake all our possessions and live together communally, and the churches had no answer for that. Yes, certainly, there were other teachings for all of these groups, and some of them were way off. But I'm convinced that the biggest reason for rejecting such groups has generally been that the religious establishment had no answer for some of the issues that they raised. And of course, the groups in question refused to shut up and stay quiet on what it was that they taught, and so the more respected denominations did everything they could for as long as they could to pretend that such contrary organizations did not exist, at the same time that they condemned all of them for being, quote, exclusive. I personally took note that rants against the children of God, who preached that the first Christians lived a more or less hippie lifestyle, actually eased when the children of God stopped preaching on the street corners and got into sexual perversions as a way to raise money for their organization. I think the persecution dropped to almost nothing, because at least children of God ventures into religious prostitution took them off the streets with their incessant witnessing about forsaking all and living together communally. You see, the churches are amazingly tolerant of heresy if they can be sure that a group will not confront them with embarrassing truths of any sort. It becomes a silent conspiracy for many of them. See, children of God have been quietly infiltrating more respected denominations for decades now, with hardly the slightest stir about stopping it. Heck, if the televangelists could find a way to make more money through free sex, they would probably be doing it too. Now take the unprogrammed Quakers, for example. As a denomination, they have special dispensation in the World Council of Churches. They're allowed not to believe in the Trinity. They're allowed to accept atheists, even witches, as members of their society. And they're allowed to condone any kind of sexual behavior, except maybe pedophilia, as long as they don't rock the Council of Churches' boat. They are accepted on the grounds that they are, well, basically respectable. They've shown over the years that they're not likely to publicly criticize anyone in the umbrella organization. So, the creeds, which supposedly join all the other denominations together in the World Council of Churches, are waived for Quakers. Quite literally, it's official in their rules. Quakers do not need to subscribe to any of their creeds. Quakers are generally rich, respectable, and they don't get into arguments with the others. Now really, that is the bottom line in religious establishment acceptance, not faith in God. Virtually anything goes in the religious establishment, as long as you can keep it quiet and as long as you don't rock the boat. As many of you know by now, I've been trying over the past year to make friendly contact with Francis Chan, who is a very difficult person to track down. I took quite seriously his talk about wanting to obey Jesus, and I was genuinely impressed with his apparent desire to actually live by what Jesus taught in the Bible. Now, so far I've heard nothing back from Francis, not because he's not aware that I exist, but it seems because he's not interested in what I have to say. Well, fair enough. But it may go further than that. The guy who produced the video, The Last Reformation, for Torben Søndergaard, told me personally that neither Francis nor Torben, whom he claims are good friends, would have anything to do with me. Why? Well, he says because they don't know my legal name. I find that pretty hard to believe. They don't know my name? I've had 13-year-olds write to me and state they know who I am. It's so easy to find for anyone who's into that sort of thing. But I think that what Torben, Francis, and others don't have is an answer for the stuff I'm teaching about obedience to Jesus. So, over time, this channel is going to be condemned for not believing in the Trinity, for not practicing water baptism, for believing that the Bible is fallible, for believing salvation requires more than reciting the sinner's prayer, or for any number of other so-called heresies, including probably a lot they'll make up. Yet the amazing thing is that they totally accept other, more reputable denominations who believe exactly the same teachings as I believe, but who hush it up when sharing the platform with those who believe otherwise. This includes such organizations as the Salvation Army, which does not practice water baptism, sections of the Church of England, which do not believe the Bible is infallible, unprogrammed Quakers, who do not believe in the Trinity, even leading evangelists like Francis Chan himself, who has challenged the scriptural basis for saying the sinner's prayer. By the way, just to keep the record straight, I personally have said the sinner's prayer. I personally have been baptized in water. And I do still speak in tongues to this day. I just argue against people claiming that such things define what it is to be a Christian. And then I repeatedly ask people to listen to what Jesus actually taught. And that is what they don't have an answer for. That is what they really hate. Just this week, a group of my friends in South America said that they decided not to teach what I teach about such things as baptism, the Trinity, the infallibility of the Bible, that sort of thing, because they feel that such topics are, like I've said about so many other things here, distractions. People invariably get off into disputes with us in defense of all those things, at the same time that they totally disregard what we and these South American believers are both saying about the teachings of Jesus. So does that mean Francis or anyone else in the religious establishment is going to take one bit of interest in dialoguing with them? Of course not. These South American voices in the desert are just as hated as I am because they still teach obedience to Jesus. See, it's really all about the cornerstone. The apostate church doesn't like the teachings of Jesus, and they will one day literally kill us if we don't stop promoting those teachings in preference to their religious replacements. For our part, we're not going to stop. So they're going to have to discredit me in one way or another until it becomes necessary to find a more permanent way to shut us up. At the moment, thanks to YouTube, I'm able to get the message out to literally millions of people, with or without their help or hindrance. And I think that is stirring things up a lot within the religious establishment at the moment. sooner or later, they're going to have to admit that they have known all along who I am, and they are 100% opposed to all that I stand for. They will no longer be able to say, like Alan Gill whispered to my journalist friend, "We don't mention them." They're going to have to mention me, and you can be sure it won't be nice what they have to say. Anyway, without laboring the matter, I want at this point to reiterate that I do not think I'm the only one in the world who is right, and I would like to have some kind of dialogue with other professing Christians, even if they don't believe as I do. But what I will not do is back down from my faith in Jesus and all that he taught. Sorry, this is not some gnat like has divided so many other believers around the world over the centuries. This is the cornerstone, and I will do everything in my power until the day I die to keep it at the forefront of the world's thoughts as we get closer to the return of Christ. Division is not my game. I'm totally fine with my brothers and sisters in South America, for example, who want to stay out of the more controversial theological stuff. But division is the game of those who claim to be trying to promote ecumenicalism. As one Baptist jokingly said to me many years ago, if we Baptists get to heaven and find out that we're the only ones there, I can guarantee that we will then set about splitting heaven. What I'm saying is that any two Christians can disagree about almost anything and turn it into a huge enough issue to claim our eternal salvation rests on which side you take. But what I'm taking a stand on is really quite simple and as fundamental and all-inclusive as anything you could possibly imagine. I am taking a stand on obedience to the teachings of Jesus. Let's look at those teachings and do our best to understand them. That's what I'm trying to do here on A Voice in the Desert. There will be slight differences in our understanding. There'll be plenty that each of us, including myself, are not living up to. Just don't let us use that as an excuse to explain them away. This is not a speck of dust in my brother's eye. This is the giant cornerstone bearing down on us as we each approach eternity. Which side are you going to take when someone comes and tells you it's all about me? Because it's not. It's all about Jesus. He must increase and I must decrease, even if it means them destroying me first before people discover that the truth doesn't stop just because they silence me. And I say all of this in the name of Jesus, that name which is above all other names. Amen.